Coming up in Primetime Lawmakers, a bill aimed to prohibit illegal immigrants from attending all Georgia public colleges and universities passes the Senate. The state spending bill for the next fiscal year, the big budget, passes the House Appropriations Committee today, putting it on track for passage by the House on crossover day. A measure to increase the reporting of suspected child abuse to authorities clears the Senate. Governor Nathan Deal's Competitiveness initiative is on our agenda tonight. Chris Cummiskey, Commissioner of the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and Alan Essig of the Georgia Budget Policy Institute will join me on set to talk about luring more jobs to Georgia. And the best political analysis on the air with our reporter roundtable. Tonight we welcome Dave Williams, government reporter for the Atlanta Business Chronicle, and Jim Galloway, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution political insider. For Monday, March 5th, 2012, the 29th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly, this is Primetime Lawmakers. Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Scott Slade. Undocumented immigrants could be banned from attending public Georgia colleges or universities. The measure passed the Senate this afternoon. Let's go live to the Capitol, where our Sasha Horn has all the details.
Good evening, Scott. Now, this bill has been met with a slew of controversy, including death threats for some members of the Senate who supported that measure. Now, you might remember a similar version of this bill was put on the back burner in a House committee after both the Board of Regents and the governor asked lawmakers to hold off on voting on the issue. But the Senate decided to take things into their own hands.
Federal law already states that post-secondary education is a public benefit.
A benefit Senator Barry Loudermilk says undocumented immigrants are not allowed to receive.
Federal law further goes on to explain that no illegal alien can receive any public benefit, whether federal or state, unless the state specifically passes a law allowing that public benefit, which this state has not done.
But Senator Loudermilk's argument undocumented immigrants are taking seats in college classrooms, leaving veterans unable to attend, was rebuffed by Senator Vincent Fort when the bill's sponsor was unable to provide proof this took place.
It is, I think, unfair to exacerbate the situation, tell our veterans that they are denied access to higher education. I think it is wrong to say to people that those folk are keeping you from an education. And that's why I asked the author of this bill, what documentation do you have that any mother's child in this state was denied access to higher education by an undocumented student? And I think you heard what I heard, essentially that was just hearsay.
Fort, who voted against the bill, says without education, students who identify themselves as undocumented won't be able to contribute to society. Senator Tommy Williams, a Republican, agrees.
The DREAM Act, I actually think if the DREAM Act were modified a little bit, it would help. You know, I've got kids in my schools that are 10 years old, just about the size of my daughter, that they didn't come here on their own. They don't even know, they've never even been or have a memory of where their parents took them from, and yet the federal government tells us we have to educate them through the 12th grade. And then we say, no, you can't go to the university system, but you know, we've allowed you to go through these other 13 years.
Now, Williams supported that bill. He says he believes immigration is a federal issue, but since the federal government has failed to act, the states have to. The measure passed the Senate 34-19 and now goes on to the House. Now, allegations that several Penn State University staff members knew about instances of child abuse happening on campus but never reported it sparked lawmakers to look to close this loophole in Georgia's law. Current state law requires specific groups, including medical professionals and teachers, to report suspected child abuse. But this bill would require anyone who knows about or witnesses child abuse to report it. Opponents of the bill say they're concerned that parents disciplining their children in public could fall victim to false allegations.
We had a good bit of trouble defining child abuse, and it sounds like y'all have come closer to it. Can you read us the definition?
Child abuse means physical injury or death inflicted upon a child by a parent or caretaker thereof by other than accidental means. Provided, however, physical forms of discipline may be used as long as there is no physical injury to the child.
Now that measure easily passed the Senate 43-2 and now goes on to the House. And the Senate also passed a bill that will grade schools on a scale of A to F, just like students get. President Pro Tem Tommy Williams spoke in favor of the bill that passed the Senate 38-13.
We also included in the bill a provision for rewarding schools that do well. You know, AYP was kind of, you either made it or you didn't make it. And if you didn't make it, frankly, there was no real consequence. And some schools didn't make AYP for 8 or 10 years. And we don't think we can continue to do that. We need some consequences for not performing. But on the upside, there were really no rewards for doing well. And so what this does, it offers schools financial rewards, both teachers and the non-accredited folks as well, for succeeding in school.
Also at issue in the Senate, the Public Service Commission's board. The PSC regulates utility matters across the state. The Senate passed a bill that would change the way the chairperson is selected. Now, this stems from controversy surrounding the current chairman, Tim Echols. You may remember Echols drew criticism after reportedly using state letterhead to request complimentary tickets to the Masters. Now, he hasn't been charged with anything, but this measure could keep him from completing his current 2-year term. Scott, back to you.
Internal battle that could have circumstances for a lot of people. Thanks very much, Sasha. As you no doubt been made aware by endless political ads on TV, tomorrow is Super Tuesday. Primaries and party caucuses will be held in 10 states across the nation, including Georgia. 419 delegates are at stake. 76 of those delegates are up for grabs in Georgia's Republican presidential preference primary, the most of any Super Tuesday state. We'll talk more about the Republican race for president in our Journalist Roundtable later in our program. But in addition to the presidential question, ballot questions around the state will have a variety of issues for voters tomorrow. Sunday, alcohol package sales will be up for approval in at least 8 counties and 7 cities. Special local option sales taxes, or SPLOST, will be on the ballot in at least 6 counties, including Dooley, Houston, Macon, Monroe, Peach, and Troitland. In Atlanta, the most, or municipal option sales tax to fund water and sewer projects, is up for renewal. In Jones County's River North community, voters will be asked to approve a bond issue for water and sewer improvements. And in Marietta, voters will be asked to approve a bond to build a performance auditorium at Marietta High School. Polls open at 7 a.m., close at 7 p.m. If you're registered but not sure where to go vote, check out the My Voter page on the Secretary of State's website at sos.georgia.gov/MVP. Well, visitors to the Capitol today might have noticed a group of mothers and children on the grounds. Their purpose was to participate in one of several nurse-ins held around the state today to advocate greater rights for breastfeeding mothers. Currently, Georgia law allows women to breastfeed in places they already have a right to be, but there is no penalty for those who attempt to restrict places where a mother may breastfeed. Demonstrators today rallied for greater protection, including fines for those who attempt to harass breastfeeding mothers and legislation to clarify that breastfeeding is not lewd or indecent behavior. The nurse-in movement was inspired by a Georgia woman, Nirvana Jeanette, who last year refused to cover up while breastfeeding in church. All right, let's go back to the state capitol where primetime lawmakers Sandra Parrish reports there was action by a House committee on the 2013 budget late today.
Scott, the House Appropriations Committee passes out the big budget, $928 million over last year, an increase of 5%.
And while this is positive affirmation that we are recovering slowly, it should be understood that this growth does not begin to regain all the lost ground from our high water mark in fiscal year 2008, when we had over $2 billion more in revenue and 500,000 less people.
Representative Terry England says the biggest increases in the $19.2 billion budget include $46 million for the state health benefit plan and $155 million for the state's retirement system. Nearly $115 million is included for increased enrollment for K-12 education and $93 million for higher ed. England says money was also included for a new state office in China.
We're making a concerted effort. Of course, the governor is definitely making a concerted effort to try to bring businesses back to the United States, and this is part of that effort. Caterpillar, of course, is one that you've seen recently. We're excited about the possibilities of several others. I'm excited about the day at some point we might get to go to a store and buy a lot of stuff or most everything there that doesn't have Made in China stamped on it. So that's part of what that initiative deals with.
The bill also includes money to keep open 2 welcome centers in Georgia, one in Plains, the other in Sylvania, which is the oldest operating center in the U.S. The full House will take up the budget on Wednesday. The House passes a constitutional amendment and a bill affecting how much money city and county school systems would receive in an education sales tax referendum. Representative Brooks Coleman says it was to address a problem where counties were being forced to negotiate an amount with city schools in order to hold the referendums.
What this basically does is in the state of Georgia, we have 21 city systems and 154 county systems. And we passed a law several years ago that allowed these systems to get together and to have a e-splice selection. We aren't changing any of that. The city systems or the independent systems and the county system still get together and agree to call these referendums the e-splice. But what this basically does, it says that the money that is generated by this would be distributed on a per pupil basis.
Of course, both measures passed with only 1 vote in opposition. If passed in the Senate, the voters would decide the constitutional amendment in November. The House passes a bill today that had a lot of debate last week. The measure by Representative Bill Hembry would require insurance companies to produce brochures in other languages for those who don't speak English.
This is the bill that the insurance industry has asked for. If they provide a brochure in a language other than English, it just simply says that English is the legal binding language for the policy.
If their translations are inaccurate and the citizen whose English is not very good reads the Spanish and assumes that it's accurate, who is responsible?
Well, this is just the brochures. These are brochures. This is information that we're trying to provide those who don't speak English so they'll better understand the insurance policies. And so what we're trying to do, say if you speak Korean, and it would be able to help that person who speaks Korean as their native language to understand what comprehensive coverage is, what collision coverage is. So it basically just gives some definitions so that they understand it better. But the legal binding document that would stand is the English version.
If the circumstance Representative Gardner describes takes place, we have preserved the ability of the offended party to seek sanctions against that insurer under the Unfair Trade Practices Act.
That is absolutely right.
Thank you,
The
sir.
lady is correct.
That bill passed 157-4 and now goes to the Senate. As you heard earlier, a bill to charge an owner of a vicious dog who seriously injures or kills someone with a felony failed in the House late this afternoon. Representative Penny Houston sponsored the measure after several people were seriously injured over the last several years, including a little DeKalb County girl who lost her arm.
Every week, too, you read in the paper in Georgia where we've had a dog either kill someone or severely maul them. And this is only for vicious dogs. And many of you might not know, but the Georgia Code describes what a vicious dog is. This holds the dog owners responsible, and the penalty is you're a felon. You can be convicted of a felon if you kill or maul another individual.
That bill failed 82-72, short of the 91 votes needed to pass it. Houston has asked that the House reconsider its actions on Wednesday. Scott?
Wednesday, of course, Sandra, is day number 30, the famous crossover day where things really come to a head. As far as the volume of the issues still left on the table, do you expect a long day at the Georgia General Assembly on Wednesday?
You know, Scott, at this point, I don't. I expected today to be a long day. They wrapped up around 6 o'clock. So they've actually hit most of their controversial issues. And I think the same has almost been in the Senate as well. So I don't think it'll go maybe as late as it has past years. Some years we've gone all the way to midnight, but probably not this year.
Certainly so. And the budget's not subject to the crossover day stipulations, but that's moving around rather quickly too, isn't it?
It is, and I think they just decided to throw it in because they had it ready.
Sandra, thanks very much. In his State of the State address at the beginning of the session, Governor Nathan Deal spoke about the creation of a 3-part plan for strategic tax reform. Tonight, we are taking a closer look at those proposals. They're being called the Competitiveness Initiative collectively, and other business issues before the General Assembly are certainly on the front burner still. And joining me to talk about all that are Chris Cummiskey, Commissioner of the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and Alan Essig, Executive Director of the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. And certainly, Commissioner, the governor's words do ring from that State of the State message. Great to see you, Alan. Great to have you back again this evening.
Good to be here.
Yeah, let's dig into this a little bit here. You know, it's really there's several facets to this, and maybe the biggest, if I'm not mistaken, as far as the price tax is concerned, is the energy sales tax elimination.
Absolutely. Basically, all the competitive states around us, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, have an exemption for the sales tax on energy. And Georgia's a heavily in advanced manufacturing state. And to remain competitive, to help our existing industries as well as attract new business, I'll tell you, like last week we heard about Caterpillar coming to Georgia, and you heard him talk about the CEO. That exemption is huge and pivotal in their decision to come to Georgia in the hopes that it does pass.
Are there other companies kind of on the bubble here? I know you can't name anyone specifically, but are they depending on that passing?
There are at least 2 companies that are fairly large size that are waiting to see what happens with that legislation, to see whether or not how we position ourselves from there, and whether we're the top 3, top 2, or the first one based on what happens to that.
Alan, your group's responsible for crunching big numbers and looking at what happens on the front end and what's going to happen on the back end. Would this be a good way for Georgia to invest its tax dollars, what might come out of the other end, this energy sales tax exemption?
Well, this is one exemption that does have a strong public policy argument for it. I mean, it is a competitiveness issue. The question has always been for the last couple of years, is how you pay for it. And to the governor's credit, I mean, the rumors are, because the bills haven't been dropped yet, is they're trying to find a way to pay for it. And the other question, is beyond this particular tax break or some of the other of the governor's proposals. Is we are ready, and actually the Tax Foundation put out a report last week that ranked us as the third and sixth lowest tax state as opposed to business goes for both mature industries and new industries. As taxes, I don't think is generally our competitiveness problem. Where we fall down is on transportation, education, healthcare, quality of life. There's got to be somewhat of a balance to it of taking advantages of the tax breaks that make sense, but at the same time, we need to do a much better job of making the investments we need in the other factors that are really important in economic development.
So we can't be a one-trick pony here and not just, hey, here's a nice tax check for you guys, come on in and build a factory. Are you hearing that as well from these businesses?
Well, it's not just about taxes. We are a low-tax state. It's what drives business here. But it's also about the fact we are the southeast logistical hub of the United States. We get the fastest growing port in the country, the 4th largest, the busiest airport in the world. That drives people here as well. It's a lot of factors. We have the best workforce development program in Quick Start in the country as far as I'm concerned, and most rankings will back me up on that. But it's also about the fact that other states keep gaining on us because of the discretionary incentives and some other things. So we just got to make sure we stay ahead of them. We are leading them, but we want to become from 5th or 4th best in the country to number 1 to attract more business. And these tough economic times, we've seen other states sharpen their game, and we need to do ours.
Let's take a look at what the governor had to say in the State of the State message here. I believe we have that ready right now. He can explain what he's after.
First, I am proposing the elimination of the sales tax on energy used in manufacturing. Secondly, I am proposing sales and use tax exemptions for construction materials used in projects of regional importance. A third piece, we are proposing to restructure Georgia's job tax credits and quality tax credit programs.
The job tax credit might be something a lot of people don't know much about. Explain that.
Well, when people bring new jobs to Georgia, depending on how many they bring, we give a per job tax credit depending on what part of the state they're in, other factors such as salary and other things. And we're simply trying to expand that and really make it a little more even for different parts of the state and try to increase that benefit to, again, attract new companies. And I will say this, we do have a budget situation and we are looking at that, but we're talking about tax credits against income that wouldn't be here in the first place unless these jobs come. And these credits last 5 years. And we expect that sometimes they will take up a lot of that first income, but after those 5 years, they go away and the income's coming completely to the state. So they're an important part of what we do.
Digging in a little deeper this, Alan, does this wind up being practical from a monetary standpoint? Well,
I think one of the weaknesses that the state has is we don't evaluate any of these tax credits. There's a House Bill 920 is a bill that would bring some more evaluation component to some of the business tax credits. We're expanding a program that we don't really know if it works or not. If we do evaluations of these and we can actually document that they're working, then maybe we double down on them. But if they're not creating the jobs we think they are, there may be a more efficient way of spending that money.
The Commissioner, have the actuaries weighed in to convince you this is the way to go?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. One, for most of the incentives we put out there, we do the net present values return to the state over a 10-year period. And we always have a positive number or we're not going to do it. And you know, Alan brings up a point, but our problem is in this day and age, other states are doing the same thing. And if we, in a perfect world, I don't want incentives. I'll tell you right now, Georgia's going to win 90% of the business because of its educational, workforce development program, Quick Start, its logistics, its pro-business climate. We are going to win 90% of it. But unfortunately, there are incentives. And in a vacuum, it would be great not to have them, but we do have them, so we have to play that game with everybody else. And we need to remain competitive. We don't even need to offer as much as our competitive states. We just have to be in the ballpark because of everything else we have to offer.
Walk us through the Caterpillar deal for just a couple of seconds here. I mean, that's considered a great coup, you know, for the state with all the jobs. Alan, when you roll all the jobs off of this, we're looking at 4,000 or 5,000 jobs when you wind up rolling all the collateral effect in this. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Chris would know the numbers better than me, but that's my understanding.
Right.
About 4,200, 4,600 is the number we think we should bring to Georgia.
So what convinced Caterpillar to come here?
The port was the number one issue they talked about. If you look at the 3 other sites they were looking at in North Carolina, South Carolina, it was access to the ports. That was number one. Second was workforce development. They made it clear that this is a 30-year, 40-year project. They need to make sure they have a workforce in place that's going to be able to do it. Quick Start really was a turning point besides the port, I believe, and why they came to Georgia. And the incentives were important as well, but I don't think we probably had the highest incentive to offer. But going back to the initial statement, we don't always need it with other benefits. And the benefits we have in the ports and Quick Start, and because of our technical college system to be there to do Quick Start, other key people can't replicate that in a year or 2 years. It's decades of foresight by our former governors and legislators to put us in this position.
And Alan, as far as the economic viability of the state is concerned, obviously if you get more people working, you get more people paying into the tax base. Got to touch a couple other things very quickly while we have you here?
Sure.
The whole idea of an internet sales tax, e-fairness. Is that really going anywhere, and how much money would that generate if we could collect all the sales tax and all the internet sales in the state?
The estimates are somewhere $400, $500, $600 million if we collected all of them. It's less of a policy problem than a political problem. I think on clear policy grounds, it makes sense to do it. We're going to have to broaden our tax base, especially our sales tax base, because of the changing economy. But it is a huge political problem to go down that road.
And finally, Commissioner, getting the governor's proposals to make the state more competitive into some sort of legislation. Have you actually seen any words yet on how we're going to do the energy sales tax elimination, that sort of thing?
I have seen the verbiage for the stuff we're talking about in economic development that the governor has. I have not seen it in place of the overall tax package they're putting together.
Okay. So that's it.
That's it.
Okay. Well, we'll wait to go there.
It fits our needs. Let me put it
does.
that way.
Okay. So it does accomplish the goal.
Yes.
Is there any chance we'll get it on the table here? Is it subject to crossover day?
I don't believe it is based on the tax reform policy, but I'm not an expert in that area.
Okay.
But it goes back to it. Everyone wants to help economic development in the state. We want to help education. We've got tight budget time, so we're putting a lot on the table. We might not get it all this year, but we have to start moving the ball down the field, and I think that does it.
Thanks for you both being here. You're experts in this subject, and thanks very much. We'll watch to see what happens. Kill that bill, shouted protesters at the Capitol steps this afternoon. Last week, the Senate Insurance and Labor Committee favorably reported a bill that would target nonviolent civil disobedience. The bill is sponsored by Senator Don Balfour. If passed under certain circumstances, conspiracy to trespass will be subject to a felony punishable by imprisonment and hefty fines. The bill also contains provisions that would ban protests by individuals and organizations at the private residence of employers. Opponents to the bill are calling the legislation an attack on free speech of Georgia's workers. Having already passed in Senate committee, the bill is now up for consideration by the Senate Rules Committee. Now, primetime lawmakers Jackie Britton joins us live from the Capitol. There are other headlines to report from around the state this evening. Jackie?
Thanks, Scott. Here are your state headlines for tonight. Atlanta schools could be feeling a citywide shift soon. Atlanta Public Schools Superintendent Errol Davis announced a plan on Sunday to close 13 schools as part of a redistricting effort, the first one in nearly 10 years. He says the plan would fill over 7,000 seats and balance the enrollment between schools that are sparsely enrolled with those that are crowded. And the weather has been causing quite a stir in Georgia. Don't make plans to land your plane at the Paulding Northwest Regional Airport in Dallas anytime soon. That airport is closed indefinitely due to severe weather that crushed 19 aircraft, leaving the hangar in shreds on Friday night. Airport Director Blake Swafford estimated up to $7 million in damage due to the buildings and the airplanes. These days, it may be easier to be a bully because of social media, but it's behavior that's also getting easier to report. The Bibb County school system started a telephone hotline last August to encourage anonymous tips about bullying. Psychologist Steve Corkery says that parents should always monitor their kids' phone and social media use. That will do it for tonight for your state headlines. Scott, back to you.
Thanks very much, Jackie. We're going to take a short break in primetime lawmakers, but don't go anywhere. There's much more to come. We bring in two of the best political journalists in the state. When we come back, I'll be joined by Jim Galloway of the AJC, Dave Williams of the Atlanta Business Chronicle. They'll put all this into perspective. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. Time for our Reporter Roundtable, part of the show where we tap our stable to the best political journalist in the state. I'm joined by Jim Galloway tonight, political insider for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Dave Williams, the government reporter for the Atlanta Business Chronicle. Jim, great to have you back. Dave, good to see you again.
Good to be here.
Well, let's start. Like fireflies, we are attracted to the brightest light and the most heat, and there's certainly a lot of heat over illegal immigration today, Jim, with the Senate passing a prohibition on all illegal immigrants on Georgia college campuses.
Yeah, this is kind of an echo of the debates we've had in, really since 2007. But what I found really interesting was that clip that you showed earlier in the program of Tommy Williams, the president of the Senate, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, getting up and saying we need the DREAM Act. Prior to that, he said he was worried about the impact that last year's bill, HB 87, had on farmers. And he says if you're worried about oil dependency from foreign sources, you start thinking about food. But what he did was, what was interesting, he offered and then withdrew an amendment that would have created a kind of Georgia DREAM Act, that if the child of an illegal immigrant could prove to a high school that he had a good record and he had good grades, then he would have been allowed in universities.
Dave, you see this going anywhere in the House eventually? I mean, because it's got to do something in the House for it to become law.
Well, it's interesting that the bill last year, the anti-illegal immigration bill, was a House bill. The sponsor, Representative Matt Ramsey, so I certainly could see it moving. Although, it's interesting that one of the points that was made by a Democrat in the well today, it was also made at the top of this program, was that Governor Nathan Deal does not want this issue reopened because there's still a court case pending. It's the lawsuits against Georgia on this bill is being heard in federal court. The governor's point is let's let this at least get settled through the courts before we start to tamper with any aspects of last year's bill. So that might get some sway in the House and cause them to, give them some pause to pass this bill.
Let's run through some other issues quickly. Dave, we got the camera on you for a second here. The Economic Competitiveness Initiative. What are you hearing about that? The language in that bill? Is it going to make it on the floor?
Well, I think there's a real good chance. This energy tax on manufacturing was the most popular element in the bill that came up, the omnibus bill last year, that sort of collapsed at the end of the session by its own weight. And there's been a lot of sentiment in the interim between sessions to pass this, maybe even in a standalone bill if they can't get anything else through, maybe with one or two other things. So it's just been the most popular idea out there. The only problem is the $160 million price tag.
Yeah.
Everybody, there's a commitment that you have to be revenue neutral, so they have to find a way to pay for it, but there's nobody out there, Democrat or Republican, who doesn't think that's a good idea.
E-fairness, the internet sales tax. You hear Alan Essig say there may be $600 million lying around out there. Jim, is that going anywhere?
Yeah, but there's a political hurdle. The governor said that he wants to tackle this, and it wasn't in those clips that you showed, but he said that in that same speech, that he wants to go after Amazon.com and all the money that's going out of Georgia in terms of sales. And the problem here is that the philosophical problem is that the state legislature wants to move away from the property tax to the sales tax, but you can't move to a sales tax if you're not tackling this huge growing area of revenue. Now, so they have to make a trade-off in order to make this politically palatable. I saw the language that was being passed around last week, and what they've done is they've included, they're trying to restore sales tax holidays in August for back to school and October for the purchase of energy-efficient, water-efficient material.
In the few seconds we have left, Dave, any predictions on Super Tuesday turnout tomorrow?
Well, it should be good. The weather's going to be nice. Newt Gingrich is running very strong in the polls in Georgia. This is a state that he has said he has to win. And I think he certainly is. He spent a lot of time in Georgia solidifying his support. So I think we should get a pretty good turnout.
How about Jim?
Well, I would say advanced voting shows that it's going to be a poor turnout to low turnout, and Newt Gingrich is going to have a very good night. I'm guessing by the polls that Rick Santorum is going to have a poor one.
Okay, thanks. We'll watch that. Thanks for your expertise. Thanks for weighing in. Coming up on Wednesday in Primetime Lawmakers, it's Day 30 crossover day. The day bills must pass their chambers of origin to be eligible for final passage of the session. It'll be a long day for the House and Senate. And help us make sense of the madness, I'll be joined in studio for live analysis by Bill Crane, political analyst with CSI Crane, and Tom Crawford of the Georgia Report, plus all the latest news from under the Gold Dome. Wednesday on Primetime Lawmakers at 7. If you missed any part of this broadcast, it'll repeat at 5:30 tomorrow morning right here. Coming up next to GPB, Travel Europe with Rick Steves. Tonight, European Insights. Rick Steves begins tonight. A great programming right here in GPB. That's our broadcast for this 29th legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. Don't forget to vote tomorrow and join us Wednesday night at 7 for the crossover day edition of Primetime Lawmakers. Have a good night.
This is a GPB original production.